This spring sitting opens with a reminder that a number of people across the province are being hurt by the Ford government's cuts. We just had families and children with autism at Queen's Park yesterday, once again protesting government cuts to the autism program. I have college and university students reaching out to me, hurt by the cuts to the OSAP program, healthcare workers dealing with the hallway medicine crisis. Our most vulnerable neighbor are struggling on social assistance. And obviously in the headlines each and every day, students dealing with proposals to increase class sizes, to use unproven mandatory e-learning, and obviously facing once again being out of the classroom on Friday. And I will continue during the next sitting of the legislature to be a strong voice holding the Ford government accountable on these issues. But I also feel it is important, and I have an obligation to speak out on some issues that aren't in the headlines as much right now. And in particular, the systematic rollback of environmental protections by this government over the past 2 years. You know, we talk a lot about them wasting money on stickers that don't stick, frivolous, politically motivated lawsuits, and the cost of canceling renewable energy projects. But I also have to call them out on the fact that they've lowered fines for spilling waste into our rivers and lakes. Companies no longer have to report toxic chemical discharges. They've given more exemptions so the forestry operations do not have to abide by the Endangered Species Act. And in places like Temagami, they are approving clear-cutting plans that totally ignore the role that forests play in combating the climate crisis. They've made it easier for developers to pave over farmland, and they've reduced water protections for aggregate operations to such an extent that the Association Municipality of Ontario made the unprecedented move at committee. I'm on the General Government Committee at the end of the last sitting to come to committee and ask for municipal councillors to be indemnified from their legal obligation to protect water. So at a time when we're facing an unprecedented climate crisis, at a time when scientists say that global emissions have to start coming down in 2020, if we have any hope of meeting our 2030 obligations, I'm calling on this government to scrap their made-to-fail climate plan and bring forward a real plan that recognizes the urgency of the crisis before the end of the spring sitting of the legislature, before we rise in June. Two other issues that I've had an opportunity to meet with people, particularly over the last 7 months when we haven't spent as much time in the legislature as normal, and I've had an opportunity to meet with people in my riding as well as visiting communities across the province. It is clear that we have a mental health and addictions crisis that this government is failing to address. While I support their efforts to bring in an associate minister and a center of excellence, the bottom line is if there is not money in the spring budget to provide for community-based mental health and addiction services, this crisis is only going to increase. I thought it was completely unacceptable that we have 12,000 children on a wait list to access mental health services, and it's beyond unacceptable that that list has now grown to 28,000 children across the province. In my own riding, young people are having to wait an average of 226 days to access mental health services. It is completely unacceptable, and the government has to go beyond talk and deliver actions in the budget next month. And finally, I want to close by saying that every community I visit in this province, whether it's urban or rural, is facing a housing affordability crisis. And I don't feel like it's an issue we talk about enough here at Queen's Park. We're seeing last month in Ottawa, I was just in Ottawa for the by-election campaigns, which, by the way, are happening on February 27th. Ottawa has just declared a housing and homeless emergency. Communities across the province are declaring a housing crisis. And so we have to start building homes for people, not speculators. We need to bring back fairness and accountability so that everyone can afford a place to call home. And that's exactly why the Green Party is putting forward the most comprehensive discussion paper on how we can address the housing affordability crisis. We're hosting a series of community forums, the next one being on March 11th in Toronto, so we can come up with a comprehensive strategy how to address this crisis. At the end of the day, the people of Ontario are problem solvers, not problem deniers, and they expect next month's budget to address these urgent issues. No more cuts or distractions like beer and license plates, but actually tackling the real issues that affect people in our communities.